My guest today is Ty Morgan, whose son Braysen was 18 weeks in utero and diagnosed with a fatal condition called bilateral renal agenesis. Ty and his wife Alexis were only given two options: abortion or carry to term with stillbirth. They refused to accept either option. In today's episode, Ty and I talk about his family's journey to inspire others to never give up, to discuss the importance of financial freedom, and spread the word about his new nonprofit, Silent Guardian Angels Incorporated. The purpose of Silent Guardian Angels is to financially and emotionally support families that are not given options. Welcome to Lifeology.
Hi, James. How's it going? It's a pleasure to be here, and we are excited to share our story with your audience.
Yes, I am as well. I've had quite a few heavy shows today, but every show has had hope that comes along with it. So yours is going to be no different. Because I know before we get started, everyone's going to ask what happened to Braysen. Can you tell us how he's doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So the little guy is at home. He's been home for over 2 months now, and he's developing and doing well. So it is a happy ending. Obviously, we're going to have a long journey ahead of us with him, but we knew that going in, and we accepted that challenge. And he's doing good, and he smiles and plays every day. So we're thankful and blessed with that.
Yes, you are. I'm so happy for you all. How is that to have that news, though, to hear these are your only options, abortion or stillbirth? I mean, how is that for you and Alexis? Besides the obvious, I mean.
Yeah. I mean, when you go back to that day, it's one of the most devastating and empty feelings you could ever imagine. To only be given those two options by someone that is, a professional in their field. A doctor, he's a specialist, not just a doctor, a specialist. He only gives you those two options. And so there's no hope in that situation, and it's just a dark place to be. And the key word there would be, devastating.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I can't even imagine that. But those weren't, so you said, no, those options aren't going to work for us. What happened for you, or what did you do to push through that, to say, no, there has to be another way?
Yeah. So for me, I haven't always been the most faith-based man, but I've started working on that before this incident with Braysen. So I worked on my relationship with God and getting closer to him. And we got a hint that Braysen would potentially have issues around September 17th at a regular visit, because they had issues seeing him. So they referred us to the specialist. And so 2 weeks later is when we're at the specialist office. And now, mind you, this is during the COVID era, so dads are not allowed into the specialist's office. So my wife goes in there by herself. She's in there for an hour, and I'm on FaceTime with her, and I can tell that it's not going to be good. And then the doctor allows me to come in to deliver the news. And before I went in, I just said a quick prayer. I said, God, I have no idea what to say to my wife during this time. If you can just fill me with words, that would be excellent. And I get in there and see my wife. Obviously, she's emotional, and she's on the phone with her mom. And before the doctor comes in, the first words that come out of my mouth to my wife, it probably should have been, I love you, or something along those lines. But the first words were, no matter what this doctor says, we're not aborting. So I'd already said that prayer. God had placed that in me. We made that decision. And the doctor comes in. He delivers the news, like you said. Option 1, abort. Option 2, carry to stillbirth, and you may get 15 minutes with your son. And we just said, you know what, can you just give us this medical report, and we'll do our own research. And so he typed up what bilateral renal agenesis meant and gave us the report, and we took that home. And we did our research, and we found a path called the RAFT Trial, which was new in 2020.
Wow. And it's, that's something I think everybody has the option to listen to whatever the professional may say. It could be, just the news that you got, but there's always another answer. And so of course we respect and honor doctors, and because that's their field, but people who have a higher power, for you, it's God, for me, it's God, for people, it may be other things, but to know that there's a purpose and a plan for each one of our lives. And to know that there's a purpose and a plan for little Braysen. And so that was something where you were able to hold on to that faith. It's interesting because so many times we hear something, and I'm sure you when you were a child and you watch cartoons, you see like the cartoons that would have like the little devil, the little angel, they're like, oh, they're talking to each other. It's the same type of thing. When we get news like that, what do? What voice do we listen to? I don't mean like a real voice, but so you have the voice of the doctor, which is what the medical professionals say, which is science-based. But then you also have a faith-based version of that. And of course, like I said, we don't minimize what we hear, but you wanted to continue to do your own research. You wanted to find something more. And so, of course, with the research, you were able to find this, it sounds like this new procedure that was just implemented. And so you were able to get the result. So I think that's a huge lesson right there, just from the get-go, that regardless of what other people say, whatever's in your heart, you have to follow that path.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I can also say we were kind of given when you talk about the voices, we were kind of given a light for our path. So before we had went to this specialist, my parents actually, which how this story is intertwined is quite unique, but my parents actually live in Alabama on the coastline. And around September 16th of 2020, the Hurricane Sally hit the coast of Alabama. Now, my parents live in a neighborhood with about 20 homes. Out of those 20 homes, theirs was the only damage, and they had to move out of that home. The home they had to move into was a nurse practitioner who had connections to this RAFT trial. So before we got the news about Braysen, my parents had already had to move into a home where they had a connection with the RAFT trial. So as soon as we got the news, we already had a connection lined up to give us this trial. So my mom, when we delivered the news, obviously she started calling her friends. And when she called that individual who's a nurse practitioner, they told us about the trial. So we immediately knew exactly what to research, what to look for, and go get it done. And so it was just up to us to make the decision and take that call to action to move for the trial.
Yes, and it's amazing. Some people call that coincidence, synchronicity, serendipity, whatever you want to call it. Divine connections. The point is that when we don't know what to do and we look for something greater than ourselves, that path, as crazy as it sounds, as coincidental as it sounds, it starts to line up. And so sometimes we get so myopic, in other words, so focused on the problem, that when we take a step and step back a bit, we start to see how those pieces fall together. And of course, your first response is natural as a parent. You're going to have all that heartache and pain. So I never want to minimize that. And so that's the first response. And the second response is, what do we do with this information? So that's something that you definitely want, or I definitely want people to know. It's totally normal to grieve, totally normal, very healthy to grieve. But then the other side of that, what is the second response? And that should be, or could be, the solution, finding the new solution for it.
Yes, absolutely.
You had so many medical bills. I can't even imagine, because with this procedure, I don't even know if it's covered by insurance, but you had to do all these things to pay for it. Tell me more about like the financial burden that came along with it. I use the word burden. Obviously, your son's not a burden, but that's a lot of money to have to pay.
Yeah, no. I work in the financial space and I love numbers, so this is where I got tried. I got tried a little bit, and I was forced to say, you know what, honey, no matter what, there's not a price tag you can put on a child's life.
Yes.
And luckily for us, we've been blessed, and I'm gracious for that. And what we did is I actually started something called the infinite banking concept, and that's where I build my own banking system using a particular vehicle for that. And so we had done that. And I planned on doing it to expand my business holdings and begin investing in real estate. But we had to use that for Braysen instead. And I'm thankful that we did. So
of course,
total medical costs, travel, expenditures, all those things probably in the last year have totaled well over $50,000. But luckily we had saved up that capital. We've been able to use it, and our businesses have kept us afloat. But it's just really important. And that's one thing that I do teach. And it's always important to be financially aware and take the actions you need to in case you ever run into these emergency situations. And you can give yourself that option, because had I not taken that initial step to take action on my financials, we wouldn't have been able to support ourselves to save Braysen throughout his journey as well.
Oh my gosh. And I can imagine how that would feel as if you hadn't taken those steps. Of course, you didn't know this was going to happen. But by the grace of God, once again, that was another step that worked together, so that you would be able to provide and pay for that. And so but I can't imagine for parents who haven't been able to do that, and then the inability to pay for services or procedures, and then how that affects their own sense of being, sense of being a parent. I mean, I can't imagine how that would negatively impact them in such a powerful, visceral way.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also, that's why we started our nonprofit Silent Guardian Angels, to be able to help people financially and emotionally. And right now our focus area is on developing a new peritoneal dialysis catheter for infants like our son. But the future for that, once we build the prototype and we get additional funds, has been is to be able to give back to future families and other people that are
Yeah.
facing impossible odds. And then also, obviously, going through the journey, we've also learned that there's a ton of other resources out there, that we could help point people in the right direction as well. So hospital administrators, once you're in, circumstances like these, they will work with you and can help you through that journey. And there's a lot of resources that, I was even unaware of.
Of course. Yeah. Why would you have to know any of that? I mean, that wasn't what, that was never what you studied. So of course you would know that. I know for me, working in the mental health field for so many years, there's so many people who just don't know how to navigate the system. And so I know how to navigate it because, I've worked in every sector, but individuals like yourself, parents who are emotionally struggling, and building their faith as well, they're you don't even know where to start. So I'm so glad that you were able to find these individuals to help you. So tell me more about Silent Guardian Angels. So does it help, for people that they get support emotionally, financially? How does that work? Or how does that play out? So let's say I came to you and I said, Ty, I'm really struggling here. How would Silent Guardian Angels Incorporated, how would they be able to help me?
Yeah, absolutely. So we set it up to where you can contact us. And if you need assistance walking with your faith, or you need assistance with an impossible trial, we'll help you find that trial. We've obviously been down that path, so we can coach people through that. And that's free of charge. We're there just to help. But the main focus right now is on the bilateral renal agenesis. So with our son, he was in the NICU for 225 days. He had to have 14 total surgeries. 14 of those surgeries, out of the 14, probably 8 to 10 of those could have been prevented had he had a peritoneal dialysis catheter that was designed for infants. So we had to end up replacing his initial one, and it caused the 14 surgeries. So what we're doing right now is we're putting most of the funds to work to develop a new peritoneal dialysis catheter that is for infants and also will prevent occlusions. And what an occlusion means in a peritoneal dialysis catheter, it means it gets clogged up on the inside. And so since he didn't have kidneys, that was his kidney, and we couldn't get it to work properly. So he got in a lot of almost near-death experiences because of that catheter. So that's what our main focus is right now. And then once we develop it, we can, if there's funds that are made off of that, we can give back to the families. And then also we can coach people through impossible odds and point them, to the federal medical trials that they may need if it's an impossible circumstance.
Yeah. So it's surprising to me, and I say this ignorantly because this isn't my specialty, but obviously your son, this isn't the first, so they have a name for it, the bilateral renal agenesis, and it's happened many times before. So it's surprising that no one has thought of what the catheter that you all are the prototypes you're making for that. I mean, it's like I said, I say this very ignorantly because I don't know the history of it, but it's surprising that no one has come up with something that you are creating.
Yeah, it was interesting to us too when we hired and contracted out the engineers. They actually asked the question, why hasn't anyone done this before? And a lot of it is just because it's new for infants to be on peritoneal dialysis because this trial was brand new in 2020. So people that would typically get bilateral renal agenesis, there was not a third option. The trial was brand new in 2020 to begin trying this out. So that's why for infants it's new. So with my son's condition, there's only 7 or 8 living children with bilateral renal agenesis, and they're all under age 7. So it's kind of a new breed of patients with this trial.
Oh, interesting. I didn't realize that. I wonder why. So bilateral renal agenesis, well, do you want to explain what that is? I mean, I can parse it out what it means but based on the words, but do you want to tell everyone what that means specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. So bilateral renal agenesis means complete absence of kidneys. And then in some children, it also means absence of the bladder. And the kidneys, for people that may not know, I'm sure most people know, the kidneys are the powerhouse for obviously for putting out urine and then also balancing your electrolytes throughout your body and filtering your blood.
So once again, I'm being ignorantly speaking here. So that affects most adults though? Because if you said only 7, there are only a certain number of children now, but you said it affects most adults?
Yeah, so in adults, there's a lot of dialysis that occurs in adults for different reasons.
Dialysis,
yeah. So the dialysis can be common with people that may have like kidney failure, or they only have like 5% use of their kidneys. And there are toddlers that require peritoneal dialysis, but they do have some kidney function. Where our son and those 7 children are so unique is they don't have any kidneys at all, so there's no wiggle room. They have to rely solely. They have to rely solely on the catheter to act as their kidney.
Wow. Wow. Well, I'm so glad that you and the team that you're working with is creating something like this, because obviously there's so many people who, as this becomes more prevalent, which unfortunately I hope it doesn't, but that you'll give hope for families just like you received as well. So the children in previously who were diagnosed with this in utero, those are the only options they were given. So to die stillborn, being born stillborn, or abort the child.
Yes,
Those are
that
the
is
only options.
correct. Yeah, those were the only two options until 2020. And the reason that bilateral renal agenesis is fatal in utero is because, once again, I didn't know this till we went through it. And I guess for me, it was kind of interesting to learn this. But the kidneys, obviously, they produce urine. Well, in utero, you're producing urine, and that's your amniotic fluid. And as a baby, you
Mm-hmm.
swallow the amniotic fluid to
Yeah.
develop your lungs. And the reason it's fatal is because the babies can't pee, so they can't develop their lungs. So what we had to do to save him was really my wife. I just got to sit back and kind of witness it all. My wife had to go through it. And she did 25 amnioinfusions. That's where they get about a 7 or 8 inch needle, and they stuck it into Braysen's utero sac, and put saline solution there to act as his amniotic fluid. So before he was born, he had 25 procedures in the womb, and then he was born and had 14 procedures after, where he had his peritoneal dialysis catheter placed.
Mm. Wow. Wow. Yeah, of course, you're going to do what you can do to protect your child. What's the prognosis for him?
Well, they kind of say they don't know, since it's a new breed of patient. They say
Mm-hmm.
that they don't give you a specific, this is what's going to happen. They give us a general
Sure.
roundabout what could be his outcome, and they kind of predict around 2 years of age he'll be eligible for a kidney transplant, and then after the kidney
Oh,
transplant,
please.
obviously he'll have to take his medication and do things like that. But
Uh-huh.
I mean, God willing, he'll kind of live a normal life, and he'll have to have, a little bit of medical
Mm-hmm.
supervision over time. But that's kind
Mm-hmm.
of what we're hoping for, and the best outcome we're
Mm-hmm.
praying for.
That is amazing. Yes, I'll definitely be praying with you guys as well. That's so it's so interesting, because to give the information you were given by the doctor to abort, or he'll die regardless. I mean, there's no hope there. And going back to your whole faith, to find hope when there seems to be no hope. How do you daily remind yourself that there is hope? How do you continue to move towards that goal?
Yeah, absolutely. So now it's definitely a little easier. So I get to wake up every day and witness a miracle with Braysen. So I get to see the miracle every day. But
Mm-hmm.
now where it's tough and where I can coach people through, because that was a really dark place, is when me and my
Of
wife
course.
got the news. And between that gap of getting the news and Braysen being born, obviously he's in utero. You can't see it. You can't see him, feel him, touch him. And so it's just scary. You have no idea what the outcome is going to be. So during those times is when faith was really developed, and his 225-day NICU stay. Also, he had two events that were near life threatening, and the only thing you can do as a parent is hold on to your wife, your spouse, and rely on your faith during that time, because there's nothing you can do except watch and wait and be patient. But now it's a little easier with him being home. We get to experience the little
Yeah.
miracle and kiss him and love on him. So you get
Mm,
to see and appreciate all the patience and work you had to put in to get him here.
yes. And I think that's one of the biggest things as well, as patience, because I know I get to learn patience, obviously not to the extent that you do, but patience itself is a lesson we get to learn every moment. And so I'm like, oh my God, why do I have to go through this again? But the point is once you learn it, like you said, on the other side of it, you can enjoy and embrace your little boy and be able to see him become a thriving young adult or young baby, which is amazing.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I would say advice to listeners: be careful what you pray for, because I did pray for patience, and now I have it. So
Yes, exactly. That's a good point. Be careful what you pray for, because there's been times I pray that too. I'm like, God, remove certain people in my life, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I didn't mean those people. So it's kind of funny. So yes, be very careful what you pray for, because it definitely will happen. So we only have a few more minutes here. So what would be the biggest, I guess, a piece of advice you'd want to give my listeners regarding what you went through, the lessons you've learned? What would you say? Totally putting you on the spot
yeah,
here.
no, absolutely. I actually, I think about this, and because I reflect on our journey and the things we've been through, and I summed it up in this 3-letter acronym: FAR. So what I've gone through is step one, faith. So anytime your faith is going to be tested, you just got to rely on faith, your relationship with, God, your higher being, whatever your faith is, that you're right. So your faith. And then number two, the A is action. So if you want to achieve something, you're going to have to take the proper action. And in our case, we had a little assistance there with things being lined up. We just had to make the move and rely on our faith for that. And then the R is result. So results, a lot of times, I know for me, I'm a planner by nature. I like to try to control things and achieve results. But it's better to allow the results to be divinely brought to you with your patient. So have faith, take action, and let God control the results is what we have learned through our journey.
Yeah, and I really like that, and especially the activation part of it, because I can have all the faith I want, but if I'm not doing what I need to do for, in my opinion, God to be able to enact whatever it is, so I have to be very mindful. I have to do the action. So there's nothing worse than having, switching to a slightly different topic. There's nothing worse than having an opportunity to come to you. You're not prepared for it. So if a door opens for me, I'm like, oh, it's great. But if I haven't done the work to prepare myself to walk through that door that God or higher power is created, and all of a sudden I'm like, okay, well, I didn't do my part. And so I think it's so important, just like you said, you have the faith, and you have to put the activation of it. And then as those two link together, that's when you see the results that you're looking for. Now, it doesn't mean it's always the results you want, but when we take a step back and look at it from a different perspective, what we want is sometimes to focus. But when we have that perspective, like, okay, now this makes sense why it worked out in a different way. And so sometimes we have, sometimes things just make sense. So I know why this didn't happen. But other times when it doesn't make sense, for example, it doesn't make sense that your son would have this bilateral renal agenesis, but you're on the other side of it, you're seeing how God worked through this to be able to create silent guardian angels to help other people as well who are struggling. So as we know, God doesn't create the problem. God creates the solutions, and everything that's brought to us, he will find the way to help us get through it.
Yeah, that's very well said. I agree with everything you just said there, because had he not gone through all the struggles, if he had an easy go at the hospital, I wouldn't have created silent guardian angels and working on the prototype, because the problems wouldn't have been as big as they were. So that's well said.
Yes, exactly. And so with the situation you're having, and the blessing that's happening with this as well, and so you're going to be able to help so many people as well through silent guardian angels. With that being said, Ty Morgan, it's been a pleasure having you on my show today. If my listeners want to find out more information about you and to learn more about Silent Guardian Angels Incorporated, and to have you show them how they too can find these clinical trials and help them, etc., where do they find all this information online?
Yeah, absolutely. To reach us, it would be www.silentguardianangels.com. Go to the Contact Us page and submit a Contact Us form, and we will reach out to you. And whatever you need, we'll be there to support you and help you as best we can.
Excellent. My listeners also know that if I cannot find this information any other place, simply go to the show notes at jamesmillerlifeology.com, and I will link you with Ty's information as well as Silent Guardian Angels. Ty Morgan, thank you so much for being a wonderful guest on my show today. And congratulations to little Braysen. I'm so happy to hear this story. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you so much, James.